I will introduce each of our speakers. We are delighted to have with us this evening Senate Education Chairman Dennis DeBar and House Education Vice Chair Kent McCarty. I'm going to introduce them shortly. I'm going to let them give any opening remarks that they would like to make, and then we will get to questions and answers. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start with Senate Education Chairman Dennis DeBar. Senator DeBar is serving his third term in the Mississippi State Legislature, and he represents Senate District 43, which encompasses all of George, Greene, and Wayne counties. Senator DeBar is the Senate Education Committee Chairman, having been appointed to this position in 2020. He also serves on numerous other committees, including Appropriations, Congressional Redistricting, Corrections, Energy, Judiciary A, Judiciary B, Legislative Apportionment, Public Health and Welfare, Rules, and Veterans and Military Affairs. He is a busy man. Senator DeBar received his undergraduate degree in criminal justice from the University of Central Florida and his law degree from the Mississippi College School of Law. He is a member of the Mississippi Bar Association, and he has served on active duty in the United States Air Force and is currently a member of the Mississippi Air National Guard. Welcome, Chairman DeBar, and thank you for joining us this evening. Would you like to make a few remarks?
Well, thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction. I'm just glad to be here. It's always a pleasure to speak to you and educators from across the state. I just want to thank you, Nancy, for being so kind and helpful over these last several years with me. I just want everybody to know how helpful Nancy is to me as we go forward with education, not only education, but a lot of the issues we're dealing with this session and the last couple of sessions. I didn't have much interaction with Nancy prior to this session, except for the emails that she would send out. I would get lots of responses on the emails. But now that I've gotten to know her, and I just think she's doing a wonderful job for our educators across the state and education in general. And I'm just glad to get to know Nancy, you, and as we move forward and do some good things in education. So thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for those kind words. And speaking of getting our emails, if we have anybody here who doesn't receive our emails with the updates about what's happening with important education legislation, my coworker Holly has put the sign-up link in the chat. So please go to that link and get signed up so that you won't miss notifications about important updates on this education legislation. Thank you very much, Chairman DeBar. Representative Kent McCarty is a native of Hattiesburg and represents a portion of Lamar County. A graduate of the University of Southern Mississippi and a small business owner, he is affiliated with the Pine Belt Foundation, the Development Committee, and the Area Development Partnership. He campaigned on a public education platform, and Representative McCarty was elected to the House of Representatives in a special election in 2019 and then re-elected later that year to a full term. He serves as vice chair of the House Education Committee and is also a member of the Accountability, Efficiency, and Transparency, Banking and Financial Services, Conservation and Water Resources, and Universities and Colleges Committees. Thank you so much for joining us, Representative McCarty. Would you like to make some opening remarks?
Sure thing. Thank you so much, Nancy, for having us on tonight. I'm really excited, always excited to talk with you and with educators and people who are passionate about education. I do want to apologize that I'm in a car. I did break my leg earlier this session and I am unable to drive. So I'm at the mercy of the people that I can get to drive me places to and from session. So I am in the car right now and I apologize for that. I'm not driving though, so I am safe. But yeah, as Nancy said, I did campaign on public education. I come from a long line and background in education. My mom is a K-5 principal currently in Lamar County, and my grandparents were teachers. All of my aunts and extended relatives are basically teachers or or nurses. So we've got a long line of educators in my family. I hear a lot about these issues from people who are living this every day. Just the conversation doesn't go by. With my mom, where oddly enough, she doesn't mention one of Nancy's emails, so I know that they are definitely getting circulated. She forwards them to me and makes sure that I see all the information that she is disseminating. So I do appreciate that as well. And I'll just echo, what Chairman DeBar said. I think that the impact of the work that the Parents Campaign has done in the last few years in education has been felt. I think the climate in the legislature. And Dennis and I were talking about this earlier today, that the climate of the legislature towards education, I think, has changed so much in the last few years, particularly this term. And I think in a positive way, I think a lot of that is because of the involvement of groups like the Parents Campaign, getting pro-education, pro-public education elected officials into office. So I appreciate all of you, on this call, that you obviously care a lot about this issue, to be doing this at 6:00 on a Thursday. So I appreciate the work all of you do, and I'm happy to be in a position to do whatever I can to help good cause.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you especially for making time for us when we know it's difficult for you to even get around. So we are grateful, and grateful for your driver as well. So we're going to get to questions, because this event is focused on education, and that's what our attendees came expecting. We would ask that everyone please keep your questions to those that pertain to pre-K through grade 12 education. Go ahead and post any questions that you have for our speakers in the chat, and I'll read those for them. But before we get to those questions, to our speakers, I don't know if you saw, but there was a news story today that has caused some concern among our members. We've been hearing from a lot of them this afternoon who are very concerned about what they're reading about the possibility of legislation getting caught up in what's become kind of an obvious disagreement between the House and Senate over tax cuts. Teachers especially are very worried that the teacher pay raise could fall victim to that. And so, Chairman, can the two of you please just address that at the front end now, and hopefully give our attendees some assurances that you will make sure that the teacher pay raise will be protected. Can you all speak to that?
Sure, I'll go ahead and start. All I can say about that is, Chairman Bennett and Kent and I, and we passed our bills out, and I believe that if left our own devices, Kent and I and Richard and I, we could get this thing knocked out and done fairly quickly, to be honest with you. The tax bill is of concern, and at this point, all I know, and this is no reflection on Kent or Richard, anybody, it's last year to get caught up in the tax plan, and that's why the bills died, and then the pay raise was inserted into the House tax bill. I can't guarantee that won't happen. Something like that won't happen this year, because I know that the House is set on a tax bill, and obviously there's significant disagreements between the House and the Senate. All I can do, and Kent and I, like we talked earlier, him and I, is we can keep doing our jobs, pushing ahead, trying to convince the leadership that this is the right thing. And I believe everybody knows that this is the right thing to have a teacher pay bill this year. We are so close on a number. We have just a little differences in the plan itself. And we're going forward like there is a teacher pay raise bill. But will it get caught up in the tax bill again this year? I don't know. And all I can say is, honestly, is I just don't know. And so Kent and I are pushing for it. Richard's pushing for it. And, that's above our pay grade. That's all I can say at this point.
I'll just jump in and echo what Dennis said. I mean, I think, he's exactly right. If the committees were left, the education committees were left, to our own devices to do our own thing, we'd have had this done several weeks ago. I mean, Dennis and I spoke for a while earlier about a lot of these issues, and there's very little disagreement, particularly for the need for this, but also, as he mentioned, just the fact that we both chambers came out with bills of a similar size, and with just a few differences in the the execution, I think is very promising with us finding some kind of resolution. I mean, my everything else is basically in my world is basically on hold, and that's easy for me because I'm newer. I'm not on appropriations or ways and means. I don't have a lot of involvement in bills outside of what I do in education as the vice chairman. So my brain wavelength during the day is trying to figure out how we can make this work. And I think that there's a similar commitment for the chairman on the Senate side. And I know obviously our chairman as well feels the same way. So we're going to keep working and doing what we're supposed to do, doing what our job is, which is to do education policy. We met today and passed out a great deal of Senate bills with no issue. And the Senate met yesterday and did the same with a bunch of ours. So we're working together, where we can. And I think, it would be a horrible thing for us to have come this far and be so close and let it get caught up into something. And I'm confident that we'll be able to figure something out before the end of this to save all the work that's gone into this so far.
Thank you. Well, our first question that's been posted in the chat actually addresses pretty much the same issue. I'm going to read it to you and let you all respond to this. It says, can you both commit to us tonight that you will pass each other's teacher pay raise bills? Senator DeBar, Representative McCarty, I'd like to hear your commitment to making a teacher pay raise happen no matter what. Y'all reached an agreement on medical marijuana and got it to the governor a month ago. You need to do the same with teacher pay. Agree on a bill and invite us all to the signing ceremony.
Well, all I can say is Kent and I are working to make it happen. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes, and unfortunately, it does involve the tax bill. And we're looking forward to getting one passed and getting it signed and having that signing with the governor, with everybody present. That's what we're working on. That's what we're working towards. We'll just see how it goes. And that's all I can say. I can't promise anything. I'm not going to come on here and tell everybody that, something that I just don't know for sure. And I'm just trying to be honest with everybody up front and tell them what's going on. And Kent and I are doing what we need to do to pass the teacher pay raise bill. And we want to get it done. And we know it needs to be done. And we're just working to make it happen.
That's exactly right. And I think, Dennis and I are both very much straight shooters on things like this. And I would always want to be as cautious as possible, just because I know there's, especially me being on the newer end to this, there's so much going on right now with all of it that as much as I would like to, it's hard to say that. But I know that, like I said, at the end of the day, we are so close on these two plans, and they passed each of our chambers overwhelmingly with our support of our leadership. I mean, we worked on the House side with, the Legislative Budget Office on the pay raise to ensure that no matter what the tax plan, passed or didn't pass, the money would be there to sustain this pay raise in perpetuity. We've done the work on the back end. The Senate's done the work on the back end. We've done everything that we can do in our committees to get this done, and we're going to keep doing that. I mean, I know that is our commitment, and we will fight until the very last second on this. And the deadlines are what they are, and we continue to push it. And like I said, this is, this consumes every minute of the day we're at the Capitol, and most of the minutes we're not at the Capitol, because it's such a big issue right now. And I just think we've got to see it through to the end, and that's what our commitment absolutely is, to all of you to do that.
Thank you. The second question in the chat is on the same issue. It says, since the House committee, Education Committee, I'm sure, did not pick up the teacher pay raise bill from the Senate today, so it had already been referred, but that particular bill was not among the ones that the House Education Committee took up. And since the income tax bill seems to be a leadership priority, how committed are the legislature, and in particular the House, to getting a teacher pay raise bill through this year? The medical marijuana bill passed quickly because it became a priority after over 70% of Mississippians voiced support for it. What will it take to make the teacher pay raise bill more than a political football for gubernatorial candidates?
And again, I would say, we're we're absolutely, that's a priority on the House side. I mean, we worked with the blessing of our leadership to get this pay raise bill done on the House side. We worked on this bill, for a number of years and involved a lot of different stakeholders in the process, and as did the Senate with their bill. So we've prioritized this bill on the House side. A lot of the, how the sausage is made stuff plays out in front of everybody, and obviously makes for a very stressful few weeks. But at the end of the day, it's a priority of I would say, out of 122 members, it's a priority of probably 117. And we are committed to making that happen. All of our members are committed to making that happen. We know, like I said, I represent a district that's made up of tons of educators. My entire career in the legislature thus far has been about education issues and trying to do right by our teachers. And I think we've shown that commitment the last couple of years. So it's not always pretty, and I wish that it were different. And I can assure you that if it were up to me, it would look a whole lot different. If we're up to Dennis, it would look a whole lot different. But we are living in the reality that we're in, which is that our job, as people involved in education in the legislature, is to do everything we can to get it done. And so I just reiterate that I am absolutely not going to rest till this is done. We've got, again, I said we've got deadlines coming up, but we're going to keep pushing and we're going to keep working. I think it's important that everybody, and I know that this, that's one of the great things about what the Parents Campaign does. It's extremely important that all of both our leadership, but also our members across the spectrum, whether they're involved in education or not, hear from everybody about how important this legislation is to them, whether you're a teacher or a parent or just somebody that cares about education. It's important for you to reach out to your representative and make sure they understand how important this is, because it's, at the end of the day, our leadership is elected on the House side. Our leadership is elected by our members. And whenever we come to leadership and say, this is important to us, they have to listen. So I think it's, it takes all of us to kind of get this across the finish line. But as far as, my role, at least as vice chairman, I will continue to do that. And as far as the committees go, our deadline for committee meetings isn't until next week. So I'm sure both, the Senate's met as well, and they didn't take our bill up either. I'm sure that both committees will meet again to answer that part of the question, I'm sure, before the deadline, which is next week. So sorry, my phone I think I might have lost y'all. No, I'm back. Okay. That's a long response, but I hope that addresses some of what was contained in that question there.
Nancy, if I might want to pick up and follow up after that as well. Lieutenant Governor and I have said it's a number one priority for us in the Senate. The Speaker has come out and publicly said the tax bill is his number one priority. I think Kent, I don't want to speak for Kent, but I think he would agree it's his number one priority as well. And so I know Lieutenant Governor and I, and we had all 52 senators co-sponsor the teacher pay raise bill. They all voted for it, 52-0. The Senate's committed to passing a pay raise bill for our teachers this year. We're also committed to funding our teacher procurement cards and increasing that funding and using our lottery funds to help increase our pre-K early learning collaboratives. And so that all stems from our Lieutenant Governor. And so it's not every day, even on weekends, Lieutenant Governor is contacting me. Hey, what are we doing? How are we doing? How are we coming with a pay bill? How are we coming with a lottery? He's always involved, and that's great to have. And so all I can say is at this point, it's the Senate's number one priority. And regardless of whatever tax bill may or may not happen, we are committed to pushing the teacher pay raise bill as far and as long as we can.
Thank you. Okay, so the next question in the chat says, with the legislature not following its own law about fully funding MAEP and the teacher shortage and retention rate being as bad as it is, what would be the repercussions if teachers strike, hypothetically, of course?
I think the state law indicates that would be a violation of state law. So I would not, as a lawyer, I would advise no one to break the law. But all we can do is focus on is funding MAEP as much as we can, bridging that gap, closing that gap. Like I said, funding the EEF procurement cards, the teacher loan repayment program, we need to ensure that we can reduce our critical teacher shortage. And that's what we've focused on. And Richard and I, when we sat down and did the education budget last year, we had talked about this every time, and it'll be addressed as we move forward to the end of the session. And, I think we are trying to close that gap as much as possible.
Thank you. Representative McCarty, did you want to add anything on that?
I'll just add to that. I think that, again, there are so many things that we're addressing in education this year, things that we've heard from teachers. I know, Dennis has spent a lot of time traveling the state, talking with teachers, and we've heard that feedback. And, we're continuing to work. And I think that there's so much that gets lost in the day to day. Again, the sausage making, it looks a lot nastier than it is. At the end of the day, I think that we'll all see that this was a priority for both sides, and the back and forth, however upsetting it may be to all of us in the process, at the end of the day, we know that this is something that we need to do in Mississippi, whether it's the House and the Senate. I think everybody agrees this is something that our teachers deserve. It's something that our state needs. It's something that would be beneficial for every person that lives in Mississippi, whether they are in public school or have a child in public school or don't. This is investing in education is the number one driver of what sets our state forward, I believe. And I've always believed that from the beginning. And I think that, again, this time of year is always crazy, and there's always worries about what's going to happen by the deadline and what's not. And that's just kind of the nature of the legislature. I hate it, and I wish it were different, but that is how it is. And we do, and like I said, we're committed to fighting for the things that we've all talked about for years. This is, again, you mentioned this in the opening, but if not for education issues and education policy in Mississippi, I would not have run for office. There's no way. And that's what, pretty much the area I've worked in since we got here. And I've listened, and I think we've seen a lot of good movement, and there's a long way to go, but we are absolutely continuing to push in that direction. I mentioned I'm not on appropriations, so it's harder for me to weigh in on those things because I'm not actually able to get a lot of that information until the ink is dry, so to speak. But I know that's the commitment of both sides of the building, and we do, I think we're trying to walk and chew gum at the same time, and maybe that doesn't always translate to the general public. But I do think there's a lot going on, behind the scenes that would suggest that we're moving in the right direction on all these teacher pay and education related bills, while also, dealing with the tax situation as well.
Thank you. So a follow-up to that question that's in the chat is, and I think that this was the point, is that she's saying, isn't not fully funding the MAEP breaking the law? So I think that the point she's trying to make here is, you're telling us not to break the law by striking, which is, some would say in the interest of teachers, but you are breaking the law by not fully funding the MAEP. And so what is the difference there?
Well, I think, and Nancy, you remember this very well, when the Initiative 42 process was, going on, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. I can't remember exactly. And the Supreme Court ruled on that and said that shall doesn't mean shall. Don't necessarily agree with the Supreme Court on that case. But a lot of folks around the Capitol take credence into that. And that's just, we've got the statute, but we've got case law. And so that's kind of what we're kind of going off at this point. Do we want to close that gap and fully fund education? Absolutely. We've seen what putting more money in education does. 10 years ago, our NAEP scores were not good. Our third grade scores were not good. Our graduation rate was not where it is now. Today, this year, we've got the highest graduation rate we've ever had. And, it's all reflection of, we put more money in education than we did 10 years ago. And we need to keep doing that. And whether it's through MAEP or outside the formula, we spend, I think, approximately $2.2 billion, $2.4 billion in education. About $2 billion of that has been through MAEP. And so that means we are spending a significant amount outside of MAEP. And remember, the teacher pay raises and teacher salaries are in MAEP. So every time we give a teacher pay raise, as well as it's deserved, it's going to increase the funding amount or funding requirement for MAEP. And so we keep trying to fully fund it, but it's hard to catch up, I guess, when we're doing teacher pay raises. And we want to do it. We want to do the pay raises. We want to fully fund education. I know Kent and I definitely both do. Richard does as well. However, that's just something we're working on. We're trying to close that gap. And, if the economy keeps going like it is, we may be able to do that at some point, but we're slowly trying to get to that point.
Thank you. Here's a question in the chat. Since both of you voted for your chamber's version of the income tax bill, do you agree that you both helped put that into play where it now sits as a challenge or barrier to passing the teacher pay raise, instead of simply saying, unfortunately, the tax bill is now in play?
I'll respond to that. I'll jump into that. No, I think on the House side, we did our teacher pay bill was one of the first things we did. And while we worked on that bill, I was one of the leads on that bill in the House. We worked with our legislative budget office, who was also working with those who were leading on the tax cut. They were able to, in talking with them, we were able to carve that money out so that we knew it would be there, not only for this year, but in perpetuity. So we worked with them on that. I don't think that, supporting another policy that, to me is completely unrelated to this particular teacher pay raise bill, while, it looks like, and it has been reported, and I'm not involved in a lot of these higher level discussions. So I know that I can tell you on my end, every conversation that I've had about the teacher pay bill, specifically the teacher pay bill, is that if we can come up with an agreement, it will move forward irrespective of what goes on with taxes. So, and I believe that, because I'm continuing to work on that every day with that in mind, knowing that the quicker we get this done, the quicker we can get this passed in both chambers, the quicker it can go to the governor, and the quicker every teacher in Mississippi can know how much we value them, because we put that first when we came to taxes and everything else going on. So no, I think that the tax policy is what it is. And I think that obviously there's no agreement on both sides on taxes, and the ultimate policy that passes, I think will look a lot different than both bills that have passed out of the House and Senate. Should one even pass, I think that it will look different than what exists in the House and the Senate. But I don't think, just being from the House and having the conversations that I have, it isn't, especially not at the Education Committee, it's not our goal to hold anything hostage to another bill. Especially not one like this, one that we've passed out of our chamber. And that's why we passed it so early, because last year, there's no denying that the teacher pay raise became a weird offshoot of the tax cut last year in the House. And, frankly, it was the House position this year, the Education Committee's position this year, that we weren't going to do that. So that's why we came out early, right out of the gate, with a really substantial historic pay raise that we passed almost unanimously on the House side. And that was in the very early days of the session. So other bills come and go. And I think that, it is easy to say that one thing is being held up for another, but I really, truly don't, and maybe that's naive of me, but I really don't think that, if we knew where we were headed with teacher pay right now, I don't think it would be subject to, one bill passing or another. I think that the teacher pay bill is simply too big of a bill. And, while our leadership does talk a lot about the income tax cut and things like that, this is a priority for them too. The speaker's got several children, I think at least one or two that are teachers and coaches. And, he is absolutely for this legislation. When we presented it to him before the session started, as our plan for this year, he gave it his blessing immediately. He was excited about it. And perhaps some of that's lost in all the talk about taxes, but it's absolutely something that our leadership is for. And I don't think anybody, especially, learning lessons from last year, I think that people realize that this teacher pay bill is much bigger than just giving teachers a pay raise. Teacher pay is so important, and education in general is just so important to so many things, and can do so much good for the state of Mississippi moving forward. I think it's the only way to move us forward. And I think that's the general idea that our leadership holds. And I know that a lot of times it doesn't seem like that because of the things that, get the most coverage, but that is our commitment, and that is what I'll say as far as the House and us getting tied up with taxes and things like that with the pay bill.
Thank you. So in the chat, one of our attendees has asked that you two touch on two topics: school recognition and facility capital funding.
The school recognition program, that's something that Richard and I, we work out in the appropriations committee at the end of the session during the budget. Do I think it'll be funded this year? I think it depends on whether there'll be a teacher pay raise bill or not. If we can get the teacher pay raise bill passed and through the finish line, like Kent and I hope, we may not put any money in the school recognition program this year, so that we can use the money to pay for the teacher pay raise. If there's no pay raise passed this year, worst case scenario, I can see us putting some money in the school recognition fund, so we can at least try to get some money back and to recognize all the hard work that our teachers have been doing. The second question was, what was the second question?
Facilities, capital expenditures for facilities.
Yeah, the school public building fund. We passed that bill out this year with a reverse peeler and it sent to the House. Kent and I were talking about that earlier today, actually, is trying to fund that. That has been historically about $20 million that was diverted from that fund and put into MAEP. And so we're trying to reestablish that fund. I believe Kent told me they passed it out of committee today, putting about $200 million into that. So that'll probably go to appropriations, I believe, and then come back to us in the Senate. But that is something we would definitely like to see to be used in conjunction with some of the ARPA money that has come down, the EEF money that school districts have used, because that public building fund money can be used for capital projects rather than just some of the maintenance projects that schools are trying to do, like fix air conditioners and windows and things like that. So that public building fund could be used to build new schools and things of that nature. So I think I'm glad Kent kept that bill alive today, and as we go forward, that'll be something we look forward to trying to fund towards the end of the session.
Yeah, and I'll jump in, Dennis, about that. The school building fund, he mentioned that goes through appropriations, and again, that's not quite there yet. I need a couple more years of seniority under my belt to get up to that level. But as far as the building fund is concerned, we amended the bill that came to us from the Senate with some language we had worked on that established a separate, there's an existing building fund, but it established a separate school building fund we'd allocate $200 million to that. We can use one-time money for that since it's a revolving loan type of fund, but it would be, a revolving loan fund. 80% of it would go to K-12 schools, 20% to our community colleges. And it would be an interest-free loan that would be repaid over the course of 10 years. And it could go to renovations of existing facilities. So for some of our districts that are, don't have the tax base or the funds to keep up or renovate dilapidated facilities, it would go to things like that. It would go to new construction or renovation for the purposes of building new pre-Ks as part of the collaborative program, or new construction or renovations for CTE facilities. So I think this is a huge, if we can get this across, and this is, and I'll just say about that, just to show, we're continuing to work on these things. Dennis and I met about this bill today. We're continuing to work on all these things right now. So all the fuss and and I get it. It is very dismaying anytime we get any bill that we're working on that we're passionate about gets caught up in the broader political nonsense of the day. Is very frustrating, and I know it's very scary. And I know that a lot of you don't have a lot of reason to trust anything that any of us say or do in the Capitol because of the way things were for so long. But we really do have on the House side a chairman who really is passionate about education. On the Senate side, you've got a chairman who's very passionate about education, and are also just decent, honest people. Think about the number of times we've been asked to make a commitment on this Zoom where we've both said, we're not comfortable doing that right now, given where things are at, but we are working every single day to do that because we don't want to do more of what was done for years of just idle promises and nonsense. We're working every day to do the work that we said we were going to do. So today, with the $200 million commitment to public school buildings, that's a huge step in the right direction. And that's money that replenishes because it's a loan that's interest-free to schools. And this is particularly helpful for our districts that aren't able to get money from the tax base and have tried to pass bond issues and they have failed. I mean, that's happened in districts with high need across the state where they've tried to get money in the form of a bond and they haven't been able to get the votes to do it in their district. So they can tap into this interest-free, basically, line of credit loan from the state and pay it back so that they can invest in their facilities. And so that our children don't have to go to school in buildings with boarded up windows and holes in the floor and, no working AC in the 80, 90, 100-degree Mississippi summer. So that's a huge bill that I think we should all be excited about and watch as it moves through the process because, again, it's $200 million, which is a ton of money, but it's $200 million of a one-time allocation that goes into the fund, and the fund replenishes as schools prepay their interest-free loans. So I think that's a huge bill. I'm really excited about that. Our chairman has worked a lot on that, and I know that he's very excited about it. Him having served on the school board for a while, in Long Beach before he was a representative, I think he has a lot of experience just seeing what even his school district, the needs in the buildings and even in mine. I mean, I'm from Lamar County and I went to school and my fourth grade classroom was in our original schoolhouse in Lamar County and the floors were uneven and you could put a marble on one end of the room and it would roll up and down and across all the way the room because the room was so uneven. And that's where we did fourth grade. And we had windows that wouldn't open and air conditioners that barely worked. And that's probably on the high end of schools in the state. There's so many needs and something like this would address that. So again, I'm excited about that. And I just say all that to say, we are continuing to do the work that, we promised to do when we were put in these positions, and we're not getting caught up in all the nonsense. And I would encourage everybody to hang with us and just let the process play out because you really do. And I know it's easy for me to say this, and I'm sure I'll probably whatever, but I can promise you there is not a more pro public education duo than Richard and Chairman DeBar, or Richard being our chairman on the House side, and their vice chairman are equally as amped about public education. So we're going to keep fighting for y'all because that's what we are here to do. And again, we're going to keep until the bitter end. We're fighting until the bitter end. So don't get too frustrated yet.
Thank you. And I will say we have a number of questions left in the chat, and we have a whole list of questions that have been submitted. We're going to try to get to as many of those as we can in the next 20 minutes. So the next question in the chat is, how do the income tax proposals benefit public education?
Well, I can tell you, at least from the Senate perspective, with the income tax plan and the two are not tied together. We can pass a teacher pay raise bill and not pass a tax reduction plan this year, and we would be fine with that. But we want to try to give our citizens a pay raise as well. We're doing pay raises for state employees. We're trying to do the teacher pay raise bill. And so it's important to give money back to the citizens who pay the taxes as well. And so that would also be a pay raise for our teachers as well. We can do the pay raise bill, cut our taxes. That would be more income and more money in their pocket. But I can tell you, being in leadership in the Senate, I've spoken with Lieutenant Governor, our Appropriations Chairman, Senator Hobson, our Finance Chairman, Senator Harkins, to make sure that whatever plan that we come up with, and that would not affect our teacher pay raise bill. And so they've assured me that, and I trust them. They have done a great job coming up with a tax reform bill this year that will not jeopardize the pay raise bill. So I think it's going to benefit public education because not only will the teachers hopefully get the pay raise, they'll get a pay raise from the income tax cut. And our tax cut plan is going to reduce your grocery tax by 2% to 5% immediately. It's going to give every taxpayer up to $1,000 rebate check. We're also going to phase out the 4% tax bracket over 4 years. So it's not going to be immediate, but there's no triggers, and it's going to allow people to keep money into their pocket. And it's also going to eliminate the state portion of the car tag. And so this will be more money that you as teachers get to keep in your pocket. And that any money that you get to keep is good because it's better for public education.
Thank you. Okay, so the next question is, it says adding in step increases in the first 3 years on the salary schedule seems like a no-brainer with so many teachers leaving in the first 5 years. Is that something that can be worked into the pay raise? The first 3 years, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was something that we've heard, and Nancy, you were there with me at our listening sessions from teachers from around the state. That's what the SRAB has told us. I think it's told Richard and Kent on the same thing when they listen to SRAB and talk to them. I don't know why, and I've kind of learned some things since the listening sessions that, that wasn't included in the first place, but I think it's a no-brainer because we're talking about teachers that are coming out of college that need as much money as possible as soon as they can. And by doing those step increases in the 0 to 3 years, it's going to increase the salary down the line and increase for teachers and the mid-level teachers, the senior teachers, and so forth. So I think that's a no-brainer. I don't think that's going to be a controversial issue between the House and the Senate when we actually sit down to negotiate a final bill on it.
I'll add to that. I think Dennis is exactly right. Just quickly, I know we're trying to get through some more questions, but that's not going to be a controversial. I think that's something we can easily sit down and, when the compromise bill is ready, when it's rolled out in a beautiful compromise fashion with horns and trumpets and a lot of kumbaya, I'm sure that we'll see that those step increases were included. Because again, I think there's a lot of really good things in both bills, and that's why we just keep reiterating. There's so much alike in the two bills. So many similarities is the word I'm looking for. There are similarities in the two bills that there's no reason that we can't come up with an even better version of both bills combined together. So I certainly think that's one of the aspects of the Senate bill that we agree with and support.
Great, thank you. What are your thoughts about the future of state testing in Mississippi? Do you think the tests have improved the quality of education in Mississippi? Is schooling becoming too focused on testing outcomes rather than authentically preparing students for the 21st century world of work and democracy?
I do hear this a lot from a lot of teachers and parents as well. And I think there's definitely some area for us to look at and see what how we can streamline some of this. And I know everybody that's on this Zoom knows this, but obviously a lot of the testing that we do in Mississippi is in some way tied to federal mandates for our federal funding that we do rely on for a lot of our programs in Mississippi. So there's always that consideration. But I would personally love to see us look at our testing structure and see where we can cut back and where we can let things return to letting the teachers teach as much as possible, and less, teaching to test. I hear that a lot from parents and from teachers, how much they don't like that and how much we miss the days of when we could actually, teachers could come in and teach and they could be trusted to teach what they needed to teach for kids to learn. And I think that is, a lot of times when we talk to teachers and, a lot of people mention salary and things like that, but a lot of teachers mention respect. And I think that the amount of testing that is required, kind of is what contributes to that. I mean, teachers think, why are we being tested to death? Are we not trusted to do our jobs? And I totally get that. And nobody would like that in their profession. And it makes total sense that teachers wouldn't like it in theirs. So I would love to see us do as much as we can to streamline that, so that it's as burdenless as possible to all of our educators and also to our students. There's a lot of stress involved in testing, and I can remember very vividly all of the miserable late nights that I had studying for state tests and being worried about state tests that I couldn't study for, and trying to make sure I knew every possible thing I could to make a 4 or 5 on a test so that I could graduate and go to college and all that stuff. And I don't know that made me a better student or a smarter person, but I did it because I had to. And I know that was frustrating for my teachers who saw that as well. So yeah, I mean, whatever we can do, I would love to see us look at that and streamline that. And it's been a conversation around the Capitol for a long time. Obviously, it's more difficult than we'd all like it to be due to the federal component, but I'd love to see us move in that direction.
Thank you. Okay, here's a question. It's a little long. It's been 14 years since we fully funded any of our state's K through 12 public schools, where 85% of our future workforce gets their first 12 years of training to become employable, productive citizens. Lieutenant Governor Hosemann has stated publicly twice this week that business and industry leaders are saying they need an educated workforce. He also referenced how strong North Carolina's economy is, even though they have a higher tax rate than we do. He stated that taxes are important, but they will not drive people to come here. He went on to say that the tax rate will not be the mover and shaker. So why should we allow the tax bills to dominate this session when we know that increasing our educated workforce is a solid plan for economic success?
Well, I could tell you it's not dominating the session for the Senate. We every year have passed out a teacher pay raise bill, and we are continuing to do that. Like I said earlier, the tax bill and the pay raise bill are not connected. We can pass the teacher pay raise bill and not the tax bill, and that'd be fine. But we understand the priorities, and the speaker has said it's his number one priority, and so we have to address it. We, like I said, are making sure that any tax bill that is passed, if any does pass, does not affect public education, our law enforcement, our first responders, or our teachers. And so as we go forward, we're trying to get our pay raise bill done and get it passed. And the thing is, like you were talking about, the workforce, having an educated workforce is key to growing Mississippi. There is a bill that we have, it's in Chairman Parker's committee now, to help deal with work keys and getting a trained workforce and CTE certifications to come out. That way, when they walk out the door, a student walks out the door at 18, if they don't want to go to college, they can go out and have a good paying job somewhere and be good tax paying citizens of our state and not have to leave our state. And so there are multiple bills beyond the teacher pay bill and the tax bill that are good public education bills that I think you will see passed out of the legislature this year and move on to the governor. And so, like I said, the tax bill doesn't dominate us on the Senate. We deal with it because that's the number one priority of the speaker, and we just have to focus on what we can and let the chips fall where they may at the end of the session.
Thank you. Another question. Classroom supply cards have been a problem for years. They get to teachers too late. This was discussed at one of the teacher listening sessions. Will legislation address that this year?
Yes, I think absolutely. I think this is something that we saw both the House and the Senate had very similar bills. Again, you know, Dennis and I were talking about this earlier too. It's kind of remarkable how much legislation came out of both chambers that was so similar this year. Before even discussing what our priorities were collectively as education committees, there were so many things that the House addressed through our legislation, the Senate addressed through theirs, were very similar. This was another one of those things. We had a bill in the House. Again, we passed it. The Senate's got their bill. We passed it out of committee today, the Senate's version of the bill that would move the date for the supply cards. So today in the House version, the House language in the bill, districts have to have the cards distributed to teachers by August 1st. And we honestly would have liked for it to be even earlier, but the actual fiscal year, with the timing of the fiscal year and the contract for the procurement cards, we couldn't get that any earlier than July 31st for the actual date that the vendor had to have the procurement cards ready. So that gives the procurement card date a deadline of July 31st to the department. The department must send those, and the district must have those to the teachers by August 1st. So again, I think this is something that, you know, one of the things that's happening in the background, this happened today, and there's so much other stuff going on that it kind of gets lost in the mix, because this is one of those issues that I don't know that people outside of the education community, our teachers, would even really need to know about. But this, you know, passed out of the House committee today, the Senate version of the bill with a few tweaks to the dates, passed out of the committee. You know, we passed it on the floor of the House. The Senate's passed it on their floor at some point earlier in the session. I would imagine, you know, Chairman DeBar could speak to this, but I would imagine it was probably unanimous. I think on the House side, the vote was relatively unanimous. There's always a few on the House side that can't seem to get on board, but we did pass it, and I believe this version of the bill will pass again. It'll go to the governor, and it'll become law. And I absolutely anticipate that, irrespective of whatever happens with taxes, this is one of those bills that will absolutely make it across the finish line, whether there's a tax cut or not. So I would fully expect the next school year for you guys all to be operating under this new timeline, which would give you your cards by August 1st.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to jump to some questions that were submitted earlier. Did the lottery funding go to education?
Yes and no. The first 80 million of the lottery funds go to MDOT. They go to roads and bridges. Everything above 80 million goes to education. Last year, I believe that amount was, the total amount of lottery funds was about 140 million. When Richard and I met to appropriate that money, and when I say Richard and I, we also have appropriation chairman have to approve what we do, but Richard and I have the trust that we can do a good budget by our chairman. And so last year we spent, I think we held back about 10 million in reserve just in case something were to come up and the lottery didn't do as well this year. But we appropriated $30 million last year of lottery money to doubling the ELC funding, to increasing our teacher supply card funding, numerous other things, creating a CTE fund where school districts could tap into that. We put $1 million into that, so to buy new equipment and things that they needed. So I was told by our appropriations staff today that the lottery is projected to be about 120-25 million this year. That would mean that education will get about 40 to 45 million again. And that's what I needed your support is there's a movement throughout the Capitol by some folks that don't, I won't say they don't support education, but they would like to see that money, more of that money go to MDOT and so forth. So obviously I objected to such a scenario, but that movement is afoot out there. I don't think that'll happen this session. I don't think the lieutenant governor would let that happen. But I think it's important for educator groups like Nancy and the professional educators and so forth to just keep an eye on that as we go forward in the next 3 or 4 years as we go forward, because the administrations do change. And, I'm committed to keeping that money to education.
Thank you. I was so happy to see pre-K funding increase last year. Will the legislature continue with that level of funding or increase it even more?
I would definitely expect that we'll increase our investment in pre-K. I know, for starters, we do have a piece of legislation that we've advanced from the House that I think has made it out of the Senate committee for the Education Committee. I believe it still has to go through appropriations as well, but it would raise the rate that we pay per student for full day and half day students in pre-K in Mississippi in our collaborative program. It would basically just put that into law. Last year, we were able to do that through an appropriation. But when we, were discussing with our collaboratives, what we could do for them this year, they indicated that putting that into statute would give them some more certainty. So they knew exactly, what money to rely on per student, so that the appropriations, if they were to fluctuate, that could put them in a bad spot with funding. But if we put it into statute, they know exactly what they're going to get. So we do have that moving through the process right now. Again, not being on the appropriations side of things, it's harder for me to speak to the overall investment, but I'm very confident that, Chairman DeBar and Chairman Bennett will continue to do the work they did last year to increase the investment in pre-K, especially through the lottery money, that continues to look strong. And I think that's a great use for that within the Education Enhancement Fund. I think that's perfectly in line with the mission of what the Education Enhancement Fund is designed to do. So I certainly am committed. Pre-K is one of the issues I'm very passionate about. And I'm certainly committed to do whatever I can to keep pushing more money towards that so that we can grow the collaboratives and try to make that an option. That should be our end goal, for that to be an option for every public school student in Mississippi to attend, or to at least have access to a public pre-kindergarten program in their local school district.
Thank you. Okay, I think we have time for one more. It says inflation this year is estimated to be around 7%, possibly higher. That means that level funding for schools would actually be a 7% or more cut because they wouldn't be able to purchase as much. I believe that's about $160 million. Will the legislature increase MAEP funding by $160 million to make public schools whole? If not, why not?
I'll trust the math on that. I'm a lawyer, not a mathematician, and so I don't have my calculator in front of me. But I will just say, make this commitment that just providing some honest feedback is that we'll do as best as we can to put more money in the MAEP. That's something that Richard and I have talked about over the years. We're committed to closing that gap. I understand that with the increase in health insurance costs, I think we're going to cover that increase. And that's why it's important to, commit. I think we've committed over $200 million just in the teacher pay. So that's as a significant offset, but we got to do more, and there's no doubt about it. And that's what we're trying to do. And if we can keep our revenues increasing, and that's the thing about this tax plans is we have all this federal money flowing through Mississippi that at some point, the end of 2026 is going to leave our state. That's when it has to be used by. And so we really don't know what our true economy is until that money leaves. But we do know we have 7% inflation. It's projected to go potentially up to 10%. And so with a rising cost, we need to either give money back to the taxpayers through a sound, sensible tax cut, or just cover not pass the tax cut and increase the money returned to either MAEP to help with our insurance trust fund, things of that nature. So that's all things we're looking at. We're trying to do the best we can. We just know we have this funny money from the federal government that's come down, and we just got to prepare for the worst, hope for the best when that money does leave it at some point.
Thank you. We are out of time. We've been here an hour, and this has been very informative. And I think our speakers got the clear message from our attendees tonight that they are worried. They are worried, and we're hearing it every day from our members that they are worried about the impact that the tax cuts could have, again, on your ability to fund the MAEP. And we hear this, we can't afford it. And that's because there's not enough revenue, but there's talk of cutting revenue. And that just doesn't sound reasonable to so many of us. I'll put myself in that category. So I guess as we close, the one thing that I would ask, and again, Holly, if you will stick that sign up link back in the chat again, anybody who doesn't get our emails and would like to, please do sign up. But also, as we're leaving, if you all have some advice, if our attendees tonight want to have an influence on what happens with the tax cut bills, with the pay raise bills, what should they do? How can they have an influence on the outcome of that legislation?
Well, I can just say that the emails that you send out, Nancy, are very effective by sending those to every legislator. I think it's important for educators across the state to stay involved and text them, call them. Emails are good, but we get so many emails a day, it's hard to keep track of all of them. I get probably 1,000 a day or so, roughly, during the session. My cell phone's out there. I don't know who doesn't have my cell phone. If you don't, you don't know where you've been. But I just want to close by saying this. I think you can see that the listening sessions that we had last year did pay dividends, that the legislation that was filed in the Senate this year reflects what I've heard from our teachers. And we had honest, frank discussions all through the last fall. I gave honest answers and I got some very honest feedback. And I appreciate that. And so you can see that in legislation like the bi-monthly pay, the moving the dates of the procurement cards, the teacher pay. I mean, our teacher pay bill reflects what teachers have told me during those listening sessions. They like the 5-year bumps. They like the step raises from 0 to 3. And so you, as educators across the state, do have an impact. And it's important to know that you have chairmen on the House and Senate that listen to you and value your opinion, and that just to know that we are not going to mislead you intentionally in any way, and that we will always do the best we can to give you an honest assessment of the landscape. And so I think that's probably a refreshing environment than has been in previous chairmen. And Richard and I and Kent and David Blunt, my vice chairman, we are not only public education advocates, we are really good friends. We work very well together, and we have nothing but education and public education's interest at heart. So thank you very much for allowing me to be here. I'll come back anytime you need me, and if you can't have me back, my email and phone number is definitely out there.
Thank you.
I'd just echo everything Dennis said as far as getting in touch with me. My information's out there. My cell phone number is definitely also out there. Get a lot of random calls from people all the time, and I'm happy to take those anytime. So if you want to add your name to the list of people that randomly reach out and call and text, doesn't matter if you're in my district or not, I'm more than happy to answer your question. And I think Dennis is exactly right. You know, I've only been here for 3 years, but I've heard, just to be honest, horror stories about the relationship between the education community and the leaders of the education committees. And
Yep.
we don't have that anymore. So we're all, I think, truly in this for the right reasons. And we want to hear from you. And, you know, I would encourage you, like Dennis said, if you're your local representative, the best way to get your opinion out there is to get, whether it's FaceTime, like not actual FaceTime on your phone, but time in front of their face, or send them a text or a call, or run into them at church, the grocery store. A lot of people feel bad about, you know, badgering us in public, but as long as you're respectful, I mean, that is what we're here to do. That's the risk you run going to the grocery store as an elected official. There are apps for that. You don't have to go in person. If you go in person, you pay the price. Just be polite and respectful, and let them know where you're at, and let them know what you care about, because that's what ultimately that's what our job is to you know, listen to you and to carry out what our constituents want, what's best for Mississippi. So it was great to be here. And again, you know, I'm also happy to come on anytime. You know, Nancy, I know we talk on and off during the session, and if there's ever anything you need from me, you know how to get me. And the same would go to anybody else who's on this call. You know, this is certainly what I'm passionate about, and certainly why I'm in this position. I think that I ran, you know, on public education, and without public educators, I would not have been elected. So I'm super thankful for that, and always in your debt. So whatever I can do to help, I'm happy to do that. So thank you again for having me on tonight.
Thank you both. You're getting a lot of love in the chat. People are putting lots of thank yous and how much they appreciate your honesty. You're being willing to spend the time to talk with us and listen to us and hear our concerns. So thank you so much. It is recognized and appreciated. Next week, same time, Thursday of next week at 5:45, we're going to hear from a panel of business leaders and child advocates who are going to talk to us and answer your questions about the importance of strong public schools to the state and to our local economies. If you're on this session, you're already registered. Just mark your calendar and get that Zoom link and sign in next week. So I look forward to seeing you. Shoot us your questions. If you have questions, send them to me and we'll get them asked. Thank you, everybody. It's been a fun evening and I really appreciate it. Thank you, Senator DeBar and Representative McCarty. We're so grateful. Y'all have a great night.
Thank you.
Thanks so
Thank you,
much.
Nancy. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
All right. Okay, y'all have a good night. Thanks.